Okay, welcome to the next lesson. So in the previous lesson we talked about the thumbnail sketches, and this was the final thumbnail that we ended with. This is by no means finished, but it gives me sort of a general idea about what I'm going to do and how I'm going to separate planes and big forms in my image. But now we're going to start our new image. And we're actually going to start from scratch and just keep this open as a reference. But let me just open up my other reference as well so that we can look at that as well. Okay, and let's open a new document. This will be our new image. And for now I'll make it 2000 by 1000, but we can crank it up as we detail it more. Okay, and we can go to Window, Range, and then use Stacked. So basically this will allow me to put my reference images up here. Just scale out a little bit so I can see it a bit more. And I'll keep this on an interesting part. Let's see. I quite like these shapes, so that's kind of what I was going for. You can maybe see it a tiny bit in here. Okay. So I'm just going to color pick a light value, but an actual color from this image. It's not that important. It's just to get some color in there, because we're not going to work in black and white anymore. We're going to work straight in color, and that's going to help us get sort of a richness in color as we progress and as we paint layer over layer over layer. And then let's take something like that. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing as before, which is just apply a gradient. Okay, and again I'll put the bright sky on top. Maybe, let's see, I'm trying to sort of imitate this composition. You can see that my dark piece is already sort of this foreground element. Okay, and now we're going to do everything on separate layers, and we're going to try to get really nice clean shapes that we can work with and just paint these in. And for now let's just do it with a nice dark value, and we'll give them more specific colors after that. But I'm not going to take pure black. I'm actually going to take something from the color range that I already have, just to get a little bit of a richness in there. Okay, so let's start with the foreground. So I might have to make it a little bit darker. I'm just trying to get like a nice confident shape. I'm moving my brush quite fast so that I can sort of cut and get a nice confident shape. Okay, so that doesn't look too bad for now. So let's keep that on a separate layer. And let's move on to the next one. And there I'm going to be painting this big form here. So I'll put up my reference. Okay. And I'll just bring up eraser as well so that I can cut away if I'm not happy with something. Okay, and let's just brighten this up a little so we can see it separate from the foreground, because now it's just the same color. Okay, so next one, let's take this value right here and start with the next one, and I'm going to repeat the shape but a little bit smaller, and this will be the first way that we're starting to apply scale as well, because the way that our eye reads scale, or the way that we can help our eye to read scale, is by repeating forms of which we assume that they are roughly the same size. And in this case that will be sort of mushroomy looking giant corals. So again, let's flip the canvas. Okay, I quite like this shape. On to the next one. And again, I'll make them a bit smaller. But I'll paint him a bit bigger and then maybe scale him down, because if it gets too small, it's sometimes harder to paint things with finesse. So I'll just paint it over here. And now I'm going to scale it down and put it in the background. Let's think about the composition a bit. Try to spread them out and place them somewhat interesting way. Let me just give some brightness there in the background so that I can see it a little better. And I might want to use a softer brush for this. Okay, and I'll just copy it and move it around, and maybe change the size of it. And let me just copy this whole thing here and scale that down as well and place it in the background. Maybe I want to flip it so that it's not that obvious that I'm just copy pasting it. Basically, I'm trying to show you don't have to necessarily even paint everything. You can just play around with copies of shapes a little. Okay. Just make that darker. Looks like I got a little issue going on here. Okay. Okay, and then we're missing our background element. And so I'll pick this value here and then make it a little bit brighter. And this was our second focal point, remember? And I guess this would be a really large structure, so you can start thinking about the shape and the scale. And a good way to do this is to just, the forms that you're repeating, just try to draw those at a smaller scale. So I'm basically following this kind of shape language. And by doing it smaller, I'm suggesting, and I'm using a lighter value. Those two together suggest that this is a large, faraway structure. And maybe here we have some smaller ones. Again, this will help us with the scale. I probably want to add small copies again of the same shape, again to sort of emphasize the scale difference. And let's use the free transform to fine tune it a little. And you can look at the navigator, that's why I've got it open here, how it reads at a smaller size. But I think it looks okay. We'll probably fine tune it a bit more. Watch tangents, so make sure that elements either overlap or have some space to breathe. And maybe the foreground one can even be a bit bigger. You can also always use the warp tool or even liquefy if you want to subtly move elements around, because we're going to use these as masks in the next step. And another thing that you can do to help scale is just take apart, maybe I'll just cut it out and I'll scale it down and then copy it and just mess around a little with that, because the smaller the shapes, the more that you can create the illusion that this is something far away. And it looks like I've merged the wrong layers, so be careful with that. Okay. And maybe I can apply a little bit of exaggerated perspective here by following some diagonal lines. So they're all sort of converging to about here where I'm holding my cursor at the moment. And you can see in landscapes you can get away a bit more with you know, not super tight perspective. Obviously the rules of a perspective always apply, but you know, rocks are organic, so you know, sometimes they can be off a little bit, or they can give a weird effect. But you got more freedom with that than, let's say, if you're doing architecture, which is very, very tight and precise, and the slightest mistake in perspective will be noticeable straight away. But still, these fundamentals are important, obviously. But you got a bit more space to play with when doing organic environments. Okay, so I'll go in a little more and see the way that I'm going to guide the eye through this this sort of alley, I'll call it, is by making these shapes point up so that your eye kind of wants to follow this ridge, and then we're going to have a focal point here on the top of this structure, whatever it's going to be. I still don't know. Okay, so I think that's kind of good for now, and let's just do a little bit of basic value separation. I mean, we've already done it, but we're strictly working in silhouettes right now, and we can do a little more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the lock transparency for every layer, so that I can just easily paint inside of it without affecting the edge work, because that's basically what I've been doing now. I've just been focusing on the silhouette, the edge work, but we can lock that here, and then we can paint inside our shape. Okay, so they're all locked, and basically what I want to do is introduce some new values that give us some more information about the form and the shape and all those things. So in this one I'll do sort of maybe a slight bottom lit, I guess. Maybe there's a light source here, and I'll do the same here, but maybe a bit more subtle. And a good thing to do while you're doing this is to squint a little bit. I know it sounds a bit silly, and you know, you look a bit silly while you're doing it, but it really helps to see what you're doing on a more broad level. Or if you're wearing glasses and you don't really see sharp, try painting without your glasses. Seriously, in this stage, it can actually benefit you to not see every details, because details tend to distract you. They're very dangerous. We love details, but they're actually not as important as you might think. They're nice, and when you res something up, you see something large scale, it's nice to see details, but they're actually not that important. Okay, and then in the background I'll just add a bit of smoke or fog, whatever it is, and this always helps also to separate the planes. So okay, and if we were to paint a similar kind of lighting solution as we did here, we'd want to paint it very small so that we're selling that scale again. Because that scale is going to be very important, because we're going to introduce these coral elements, and we kind of know what a coral looks like and what size it is, and we're going to have to create the illusion to the viewer that these are really big. You don't want to give that away. And that all has to do with scale. It's something very difficult, something that I find I have a lot of trouble with, but it's very important, definitely if you're doing a large environment. So at this point, I'm suggesting that there's a similar sort of that there are similar lit parts on this structure, but by making them really sparse and a lot smaller, I am suggesting scale. And I can probably make the sky a bit darker so that I will have more room to play with light. But here you want to watch out in the back. I want this value of the sky here to always be lighter than my silhouettes. Otherwise they will not read anymore. So let me just compress the contrast here. Something like that. This will give me a nice space to play with. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this lesson. And in the next lesson, we're going to apply a bit more color, and we're going to start talking about the actual materials. So not so much focus on the silhouettes, but actually what is everything made of. We won't use any photos yet. We'll just stick to painting for now, but it's a bit more defining. And we can also think about our light source, because we actually don't really have definitive light source yet. So that will be in the next video lesson.